be surprised if I told you the biggest political party in the United States is no party, and it's not particularly close? Would you be surprised if I told you unaffiliated voters nearly outnumber registered Democrats and registered Republicans combined? A lot of people are surprised to hear that, but it's true. Unaffiliated voters make up around 43% of the electorate. Registered Democrats and Republicans are around 27% each, and yet we still live in a political culture where every 2 and 4 years we are presented with a choice between Democrat candidates and Republican candidates, and we're told these are our only two options, even though these two major parties are only each able to claim just over a quarter of the electorate as registered members. Is there anything about this that makes sense? There is not. But the Democrats and the Republicans have spent more than a century and a half conspiring with one another to build a false reality aided and abetted by the legacy news media in which you, the voter, are told you have no other choice but to support one or the other wing of their establishment uni-party. They don't want you to know that unaffiliated voters are far and away the biggest block of voters in the American electorate. They talk about independents as if they are just a fringe group that is massively outnumbered by major party voters, even though that's the opposite of the truth. They very badly want you to continue believing you have no electoral choice except between the two ossified, institutionalized, corporatized factions that have dominated our politics ever since the election of 1860, neither of which has any animating principles or actual beliefs, except in maintaining their own dominance. And the longer that dominance is maintained, the more the effective functioning of our system of government, as envisaged by the framers of our republic, is rendered impossible. Is there any good reason why our politics ought to be dominated forever by the same two parties we have had since the Civil War, when neither one of them is able to command even a third of the electorate in terms of registered members? There is not. I bring up the election of 1860 because that election was 165 years ago today, and it's the only election in our history in which the candidates from 4 different parties all won states and all won electoral votes, and also because it might be a preview of what our elections could look like when and if the uni-party stranglehold is ever broken. It's Thursday, the 6th of November. This is Curmudgeon's Corner. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where let's all honor Nancy Pelosi on the day of her retirement by sending her a tube of denture adhesive, which she very clearly needs. I'm really going to miss listening to those things clattering around in her mouth each time she is screaming a load of invective at someone. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to Curmudgeon's Corner. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because if we are going to talk about the election of 1860, the elephant in the room first needs to be dispensed with. As we know, the result of the election of 1860 was the proximate animating cause of the Civil War, and it's been very fashionable for these last few years, especially among commentators on the right, to intone that we are on the verge of a second Civil War. I don't believe that's true, because you need a couple of different factors to exist before a civil war pops off. First, you need a big political issue that's been roiling the country for a period of many decades. In 1860, the issue of slavery had been roiling the country ever since its founding 4 years earlier. Second, you need obviously demarcated geographic battle lines. We had those in 1860. We had slave states in the South, free states in the North, and a big bright line across the continent, dividing the one from the other. Today, we have a markedly different situation. Today, in just about every state in the Union, we have hyper-liberal big cities where Democrats dominate everything, surrounded by suburbs and small towns and rural areas that get more conservative the farther away you get from the big population centers. And you just can't fight a civil war that way. It makes the whole conversation kind of a non-starter. But make no mistake, there certainly are parallels between now and then. The biggest parallel being that the Democrat Party still uses its indentured servant class to artificially inflate its own numbers and its own power. This goes back to the 3/5 Compromise at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, which, the next time your woke leftist friend tries to use that as an example of what a racist country we are because we only said blacks are 3/5 of a human, do be sure to politely remind them that they are actually arguing the pro-slavery position. The southern slave states wanted slaves counted in the census just the same as citizens, because obviously that would bolster their population numbers and give them a larger number of seats in the House of Representatives that they could then use to advance the cause of slavery. It was anti-slavery Northerners who proposed the 3/5 Compromise. They told their southern slave-holding countrymen, come on guys, you can't have it both ways. You can't count these people as full citizens for the purpose of the census while not granting them any human rights and continuing to hold them in a condition of involuntary servitude. That dog just ain't gonna hunt. But it is the exact self-same thing that they do today with illegal aliens. Open up the border, pack in as many of them as possible, get them settled in the big Democrat-controlled cities, get them counted in the census, and boom, just like magic, your party has an artificial cushion of 25, 26 seats in the House of Representatives. And let nobody tell you that's a different thing from what the Southern slaveholders were trying to do in 1787, because it's not a different thing. So, now that we have dispensed with the elephant in the room, or the donkey in the room, as the case may be, we are on to the election of 1860. There are two very noteworthy things about that election that jump out at you when you look at the raw numbers. The first is it's the only election in our history in which the winning candidate finished with less than 40% of the national popular vote. The second, as I mentioned before, it's the only election in our history in which 4 candidates all won states and all won electoral votes. Did the Republicans think they had a realistic chance of winning when they nominated Abraham Lincoln? Probably not. If they thought they had a realistic chance of winning, they probably would have chose a different candidate. The Republican Party has only existed for about 5 minutes at that point. It's a single-issue pressure group. It really has no platform except for being trenchantly opposed to the expansion of slavery. Its membership is made up of former Whigs, like Lincoln himself, and anti-slavery Northern Democrats who have broken with their party over the issue of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty refers to the position that when new states and territories are established, the people of that state or territory should be the ones to decide whether slavery is going to be legal or illegal. That is the official position of the Democrat Party and its nominee, Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois, who of course previously defeated Lincoln in the famous Senate election of 1856. But that's not good enough for the Southern Democrats. The Southern Democrats think every new state and territory in the southern part of the country, all the way to the Pacific Ocean, should be slave states and slave territories by default. They are offended by the notion that slavery should be walled off and confined to only the places where it's currently legal, and they view popular sovereignty as a lily-livered half measure, so they decide to break with the National Party and to reject Senator Douglas as their nominee, so they hold their own convention, and they nominate Vice President John Breckinridge of Kentucky as their candidate. These are the guys who are basically taking the position that you either give us everything we want or we are leaving the damn Union and you can all go straight to hell. So we've already got a 3-way race, but here is where things get even weirder yet. Because there's a sizable number of Southern former Whigs who want no part of any Northern abolitionist Republican candidate, and they want no part of any Northern Democrat popular sovereignty candidate, but they are also not so radical on the issue of spreading slavery that they are comfortable potentially tearing apart the country over it. So they don't want to support the Southern Democrats either. So they form a fourth faction called the Constitutional Union Party, and they nominate former Senator John Bell of Tennessee to be their candidate. But here is the really weird part. The Constitutional Unionists don't actually want to win the election. The way they see it, if any of the other 3 guys win, it's going to tear the Union apart and there is going to be a civil war and a horrific effusion of blood. And I guess they weren't wrong. So their strategy is, let's make this a 4-way race and hopefully we can pick off enough states and enough electoral votes so nobody gets to the required threshold for victory, and then, per the Constitution, the new president will have to be selected by the House of Representatives, which they saw as the only way to be sure of preserving the Union. In the actual event, you effectively wound up with a Northern presidential race between Lincoln and Douglas, and a Southern presidential race between Breckinridge and Bell. Lincoln wins 39.7% of the national popular vote, 18 states, 180 electoral votes, or 28 votes beyond the threshold that the Constitutional Unionists were trying to prevent anybody from getting to. Douglas finishes comfortably in second place in the popular vote with 21.5%. But such are the peculiar quirks of our system that he finishes dead last in the Electoral College. He only carries 2 states, Missouri and New Jersey, and 12 electoral votes. Breckinridge dominates in the South, wins 11 states, 72 electoral votes, 14.5% of the national popular vote. And Bell and the Constitutional Unionists bring up the rear, 12.2% of the popular vote. They carry 3 states, Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee. Perhaps not coincidentally, all of them are border states, and they get 39 electoral votes. And in the 165 years since, the Democrat nominee and the Republican nominee have finished in first and second place in every election except one. That was 1912. when former President Theodore Roosevelt finished second running on the Progressive Party ticket and the Republican incumbent President William Howard Taft finished in a humiliating third. And for those who are curious, there are 4 other instances post-1860 in which third-party candidates have managed to win states and thus electoral votes. 1892, James Weaver, Populist, 5 states, 22 electoral votes. 1924, Robert La Follette, Progressive, 1 state, 13 electoral votes. 1948, Strom Thurmond, States' Rights, 4 states, 39 electoral votes. And 1968, George Wallace, American Independent, 5 states, 46 electoral votes. But there is no good reason why these should just be occasional isolated instances and uniparty dominance should be a permanent way of life. And there's arguably less good reason now than there's ever been when registered members of the 2 major parties that have dominated our politics for more than a century and a half only command 54% of the electorate between them, and that percentage continues to fall. If it should ever happen that the 40-something% of the electorate that's unaffiliated with either major party should decide to shit-can the uniparty and coalesce into a couple of coherent factions and start nominating their own candidates, we could wind up seeing 1860-style elections sooner than anybody might expect. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is difficult to say, but this reporter would submit, as I have often submitted, that a permanent stranglehold by 2 factions that have long since become institutions unto themselves is an impediment to the effective functioning of our system as our founders designed it. The animal kingdom is a wondrous and many-splendored thing, and we do ourselves a disservice when we pretend there are no creatures in it, except donkeys and elephants and the occasional bull moose. I'm done. That's all I've got. This has been Curmudgeon's Corner for Thursday, the 6th of November. Thanks very much indeed for watching. See you next time. Get off my lawn.